"There's a man inside your trunk, and he's still alive." The words stopped Ethan Sterling cold just 3 steps before the cathedral doors opened. Around him, wedding bells echoed across the marble courtyard of St. Augustine Chapel in Palm Beach, Florida, while photographers shouted his name from behind velvet ropes. White roses lined the stone staircase. A string quartet played softly beneath the morning sun. Everything looked perfect, billion-dollar perfect. But the young black waitress standing in front of him looked like she had just seen death itself. Naomi Brooks clutched a silver serving tray tightly against her chest, her knuckles pale from pressure. Her breathing was uneven. A loose curl had slipped free from beneath her uniform cap, sticking against her forehead from the humidity. She should not have been speaking to him. Not today. Not on the morning of the most televised wedding in America. Ethan's security team immediately stepped forward. "Sir, do you want us to remove her?" one guard asked quietly into his earpiece. But Ethan didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on Naomi's face. Not because of what she said, because of how she said it. No performance. No desperation. Just fear. Real fear. "What did you just say?" Ethan asked slowly. Naomi swallowed hard and glanced toward the black limousine parked near the fountain at the edge of the courtyard. The trunk was shut. Motionless. Ordinary. And somehow, that made it worse. "I heard someone banging from inside it last night," she whispered. "Please, don't leave before you check." The string quartet continued playing behind them. Guests laughed nearby beneath white canopies as waiters carried champagne across the lawn. No one noticed the tension standing just inches from the church entrance. Ethan let out a cold breath through his nose. "You realize how insane that sounds?" Naomi nodded immediately. "I know." "Then why say it?" For a second, Naomi hesitated. Her eyes drifted downward. Because nobody else listened. Ethan Sterling was not a man easily shaken. At 39 years old, the CEO of Sterling Biotech had built a pharmaceutical empire worth nearly $12 billion. News anchors called him disciplined. Investors called him brilliant. Competitors called him ruthless. Ethan preferred predictable things. Numbers. Contracts. Outcomes. Not rumors from waitresses moments before his wedding ceremony. Especially not today. Today was supposed to erase 6 difficult months of scandals, shareholder pressure, and ugly family headlines surrounding his younger brother Noah Sterling, who had disappeared after a public argument over company ownership weeks earlier. The media called Noah unstable, reckless, addicted to attention. Ethan stopped defending him a long time ago. But as Naomi stood there trembling beneath the Florida sunlight, something uncomfortable crept into Ethan's chest. Instinct. The kind he usually ignored. "Sir," another security guard interrupted softly, "the bride is asking for you." Ethan looked toward the cathedral doors where Victoria Hale stood waiting inside beneath towering stained glass windows. America's favorite socialite. Beautiful, elegant, untouchable. Even from a distance, she looked flawless in white silk and diamonds. Cameras adored her. So did shareholders. Together, they looked like power itself. But for the first time all morning, Ethan felt uncertainty. Naomi stepped closer before the guards could stop her. "I'm not trying to ruin your wedding," she said quietly. "But if you drive away in that car before opening the trunk, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life." The wind shifted suddenly across the courtyard, rattling the flower arrangements beside the staircase. Somewhere near the fountain, a car alarm chirped once, then stopped. Ethan's jaw tightened. He should walk away. He should ignore her. That would be logical, safe, controlled. But then Naomi said 5 words that made the blood drain from his face. "I heard him say your name." Ethan Sterling had spent most of his life learning how to ignore emotion. Panic clouded judgment. Fear weakened leverage. Doubt destroyed control. That philosophy had helped him build an empire from a rented office in downtown Boston into one of the most powerful biotech corporations in the country. But standing there beneath the cathedral bells with Naomi Brooks, staring at him like she was carrying the weight of a funeral instead of a serving tray, Ethan felt something he had not felt in years. Unease. Deep. Sharp. Unwelcome. "Who exactly did you hear?" he asked quietly. Naomi glanced toward the limousine again before answering. "I could not see his face. I only heard him talking." "Talking to who?" "I do not know." Ethan stepped closer. "Then how do you know he said my name?" Naomi hesitated. The sound of distant applause erupted from inside the cathedral as guests reacted to something the wedding coordinator announced over the microphone. Everything outside still looked beautiful. White orchids swayed in the warm ocean breeze. Champagne glasses sparkled beneath the sunlight. Somewhere near the garden fountain, reporters adjusted camera lenses worth more than most people made in a year. But Naomi looked like she was standing in the middle of a storm no one else could see. Because he kept saying the same thing over and over, she whispered. Ethan's expression hardened. What thing? Naomi swallowed. Tell Ethan it was Victoria. Silence. The kind that does not just fill the air. The kind that changes it. Ethan stared at her without blinking. For a moment, even the wedding bells sounded distant. Victoria, his fiancée, the woman currently waiting for him at the altar. The woman every business magazine in America had called the perfect match for Sterling Biotech's future. Beautiful, strategic, untouchable. Ethan immediately shook his head once, cold and dismissive. No, Naomi did not argue. She simply looked at him with exhausted eyes. I knew you would not believe me. Ethan exhaled sharply and rubbed a hand across his jaw. You are accusing my fiancé of what exactly? I am not accusing anybody, Naomi said carefully. I am telling you what I heard. One of Ethan's security guards stepped forward again. Sir, we should move inside. The ceremony starts in 4 minutes. Ethan ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on Naomi. Start from the beginning, he ordered. Naomi looked nervous now. Not dramatic nervous. Real nervous. The kind that comes from knowing powerful people can erase you with one phone call. I was cleaning the South Ballroom around 2:30 this morning, she explained softly. Most of the guests had already gone upstairs. I was collecting empty glasses when I heard something outside near the underground garage. Ethan said nothing. Naomi continued. At first I thought it was construction workers. Then I heard banging. Her fingers tightened around the tray again. Not loud. Weak. Like somebody trying not to be heard. Ethan felt tension crawl slowly into his shoulders. Go on. I followed the sound to the garage level. I saw 2 men near the limousine. My security team? Naomi shook her head immediately. No uniforms. No badges. Ethan's face darkened slightly. What were they doing? Naomi looked down. One of them opened the trunk for a second. And her voice dropped almost to a whisper. I saw a hand move inside. Ethan's heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That was always the dangerous stage. When he became too calm. Too focused. Why did you not call the police? Naomi let out a humorless laugh. Because one of the men saw me. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Did he threaten you? Naomi nodded once. He told me rich people do not like staff members who create problems. A gust of ocean wind swept through the courtyard. Somewhere above them, church bells rang again. Inside the cathedral, the music shifted. Victoria was about to walk down the aisle. But Ethan Sterling no longer cared about the ceremony. Because for the first time all morning, he realized something terrifying. Naomi Brooks was not asking him to believe her. She was asking him to survive. Ethan Sterling walked away from the cathedral without saying a word to anyone. The moment he stepped down from the marble staircase, the energy around him shifted instantly. Security guards exchanged confused looks. Wedding planners froze with clipboards pressed against their chests. Guests began whispering beneath the white silk canopies lining the courtyard. Something was wrong. Everyone could feel it. Ethan moved fast across the property toward the underground garage beneath the resort, while Naomi struggled to keep up beside him in her black server uniform and worn sneakers. Sir, you need to. Tell me what you are planning, one of the guards called after him. Ethan did not slow down. Open the garage, he ordered coldly. Now. The guard hesitated. Mr. Sterling, the ceremony starts in less than 3 minutes. Ethan stopped walking. Slowly turned. The look in his eyes silenced the entire hallway. Open. The garage. The steel security gate lifted with a mechanical hum, revealing the private underground parking level beneath the cathedral resort. The temperature felt colder down there. Concrete walls. Dim overhead lights. Rows of luxury vehicles sitting motionless beneath shadows. Somewhere above them, the muffled sound of church music echoed through the ceiling vents like a different world entirely. Naomi immediately recognized the black limousine parked near the far corner beside the maintenance elevator. That is the one, she whispered. Ethan stared at the vehicle in silence. On the surface, nothing looked unusual. The car was polished perfectly. Untouched. Elegant. But then Ethan noticed something small that made his stomach tighten. Mud across the rear tire. Fresh. This limousine had been moved recently. Everybody stay back, Ethan ordered. One of the guards stepped forward carefully. Sir, let us handle this. No, Ethan walked toward the trunk himself. Each step echoed sharply through the garage. Naomi could hear her own heartbeat now. Ethan reached the back of the limousine and paused with his hand hovering above the trunk release. For the first time all morning, doubt cracked through his carefully controlled expression. Because deep down, part of him already knew. Naomi watched his jaw tighten. Mr. Sterling, she said softly, you do not have to do this alone. Ethan looked at her briefly. Strange how quickly everything had changed. Less than 15 minutes ago, she had been invisible to him. Just another exhausted waitress carrying champagne through rooms full of wealthy strangers. Now she was the only person he trusted. Ethan pressed the trunk release. Click. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silence. Slowly, the trunk lifted open. One of the security guards inhaled sharply behind him. Naomi covered her mouth instantly. Inside, the trunk was Noah Sterling. Ethan's younger brother lay curled awkwardly beneath a gray blanket, his wrists loosely restrained with zip ties, his white dress shirt wrinkled and stained with dirt. His face looked pale beneath the garage lights, but his chest still moved in shallow breaths. Alive. Ethan froze completely, every muscle in his body locked. For several endless seconds, he could not even breathe. Noah's eyelids fluttered weakly before finally opening halfway. His voice came out rough and dry. Ethan. Ethan dropped to one knee beside the trunk immediately. Noah. Hearing his own voice shake startled him more than the discovery itself. The brothers had not spoken in almost 6 months. Their last conversation ended with lawyers, accusations, and headlines across every financial news channel in America. Noah swallowed painfully and tried to sit up. She lied, he whispered. Ethan frowned. Who lied? Noah looked terrified now. Not dramatic terrified. Broken terrified. Victoria. Silence crashed across the garage again. Naomi looked toward Ethan slowly. One of the security guards immediately reached for his radio. Ethan stood up so fast the movement startled everyone nearby. Nobody says a word upstairs, he ordered sharply. Nobody. His breathing had changed now. Faster. Harder. The kind of breathing that comes when a man realizes his entire life might have been built on a lie. Noah grabbed Ethan's sleeve weakly before he could step away. She wanted control of the company, he whispered. And she thought I would stop her. Ethan stared at his brother in disbelief. Above them, the church organ began playing the wedding processional. Victoria Hale was walking toward the altar while Ethan Sterling stood underground staring into the trunk of a limousine that had just destroyed everything he thought he knew. The underground garage no longer felt like part of a wedding venue. It felt like the center of a collapsing empire. Ethan Sterling stood motionless beside the open trunk while security guards carefully helped Noah out of the limousine and onto a nearby bench near the elevator wall. Noah looked exhausted. His expensive dress shirt hung loosely against his frame, and dark circles shadowed his eyes like he had not slept in days. Naomi stayed several feet away, silent now, watching everything unfold beneath the flickering garage lights. She could feel the tension growing heavier by the second. Ethan crouched in front of his brother. Start talking, he said quietly. Noah gave a weak laugh that sounded more sad than amused. You finally want the truth? Ethan's jaw tightened. I want facts. Noah leaned back against the concrete wall slowly. Victoria has been moving company assets for months. Ethan shook his head immediately. Impossible. You never checked because you trusted her. Ethan's face hardened at the word trusted. Noah continued carefully, breathing unevenly between sentences. 3 shell corporations. Offshore transfers. Fake acquisition accounts. I found everything 6 weeks ago. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. Then why disappear? Noah looked down at his trembling hands. Because the moment I confronted her, people started following me. Naomi noticed Ethan's expression change then. Not anger. Worse. Recognition. Small moments replayed behind his eyes now, like shattered pieces of glass suddenly forming a picture. Victoria insisting Noah was unstable. Victoria pushing for emergency board restructuring. Victoria convincing Ethan to remove his brother from executive meetings. One memory after another. All perfectly reasonable at the time. All terrifying now. One of the security guards approached carefully holding a tablet. "Sir," he said quietly, "the ceremony is delayed. Miss Hale is asking where you are." Ethan did not even look up. "Tell her I am on my way." The guard hesitated. "Should I mention your brother?" No, his voice came out colder this time. Sharper. The guard immediately stepped away. Noah watched Ethan carefully. "You still love her?" Ethan let out a humorless laugh beneath his breath. "I do not even know who she is anymore." Silence settled across the garage again. Somewhere overhead, muffled church music continued drifting through the ventilation system, while guests upstairs waited beneath crystal chandeliers and white flower arches for a wedding that suddenly felt poisoned by secrets. Naomi looked toward the limousine again. Something still bothered her. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly. Ethan glanced at her. "What?" Naomi pointed toward the inside of the trunk. There was something else in there. Ethan frowned and walked back toward the vehicle. The gray blanket Noah had been lying beneath was partially folded now. Underneath it sat a black leather folder secured with a silver clasp. Ethan opened it carefully. His face changed instantly. Documents. Contracts. Bank transfers. Corporate authorization forms carrying forged digital signatures under Sterling Biotech accounts. Naomi could not understand most of the pages, but she understood Ethan's reaction immediately. This was not gossip anymore. This was evidence. Noah looked exhausted as he spoke again. "She planned to marry you before the board meeting next week." Ethan flipped through the papers slowly. "Why?" Noah swallowed hard. "Because once you signed the merger authorization after the wedding, she would control everything." Ethan stared down at the documents while anger slowly replaced shock inside his eyes. Not loud anger. Dangerous anger. Controlled. Focused. The kind that changes lives. Naomi watched him carefully. Men like Ethan Sterling were used to controlling every room they entered. But betrayal hit differently when it came from the one person you lowered your guard around. Suddenly, another voice echoed through the garage entrance. "Ethan." Everyone turned at once. Victoria Hale stood near the security gate in her wedding gown, framed beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the underground garage. Cameras and flower petals belonged upstairs. Down here, dressed in white silk beside cold concrete walls, she looked less like a bride and more like a secret finally dragged into daylight. Her eyes moved from Ethan to Noah to the open trunk, then to Naomi. And for the first time all morning, Victoria stopped smiling. Victoria Hale did not look frightened when she stepped into the underground garage. That was the first thing Naomi noticed. Most people would have panicked seeing a groom standing beside an open trunk with his missing brother sitting against a concrete wall, surrounded by security guards. But Victoria stayed composed, elegant, controlled. The massive diamond on her left hand caught the cold fluorescent light as she slowly approached Ethan in her white wedding gown. "What is going on?" she asked softly. Ethan stared at her without answering. The silence stretched long enough to make the air feel heavy. Noah let out a weak laugh from the bench behind them. "You should tell her, Ethan." Victoria's eyes immediately snapped toward Noah. Just for a second, the mask slipped. Naomi saw it clearly. Not surprise. Irritation. Then the smile returned almost instantly. "Noah," Victoria said carefully. "Everyone thought you disappeared. That was the idea." Ethan finally spoke. His voice sounded calm now. Too calm. "Why was my brother inside the trunk of my wedding car?" Victoria blinked once. "What?" Ethan stepped closer, holding the black leather folder in his hand. "Do not insult me by pretending you are confused." Victoria's eyes dropped briefly toward the folder. Naomi noticed the tiny shift immediately. So did Ethan. "Where did you get that?" Victoria asked quietly. Ethan ignored the question. 3 offshore corporations. He opened the folder slowly. Fraudulent account transfers. Forged merger authorizations. His jaw tightened. "And somehow every trail leads back to you." Victoria looked around the garage carefully now. Security guards. Noah. Naomi standing silently near the elevator wall. The open trunk. The atmosphere had changed completely. This was no longer a wedding morning. This was exposure. "Ethan," Victoria said softly, taking a step toward him, "you are exhausted. Your brother is manipulating you again." Noah shook his head weakly from the bench. Still lying. Even now. Victoria ignored him. "You know how unstable he has been these last few months." Ethan's expression darkened immediately. "Do not do that." "Do what?" "Turn this into his fault." Victoria folded her arms slowly. Because it is. The words echoed sharply across the concrete garage. Naomi watched Ethan carefully now. She could almost see the battle happening behind his eyes. Love against evidence. Memory against truth. That was the cruel thing. About betrayal. It never arrived looking ugly. It arrived wearing the face you trusted most. Victoria stepped closer again. Ethan, look at me. He did not move. Everything I have ever done was for us. For your future. Ethan lifted the folder slightly. By stealing from my company? By protecting it. Noah laughed again, bitter this time. There it is. Victoria's composure cracked for the first time. You were going to destroy everything. She snapped toward Noah. You were reckless. Emotional. Weak. Ethan's eyes narrowed slowly. Naomi noticed his breathing change again. Slower now. Dangerous. Victoria realized it too. She softened her voice instantly. Ethan, listen to me. But Ethan interrupted her quietly. Did you put my brother in that trunk? Silence. Real silence. Even the ventilation fans overhead suddenly sounded loud. Victoria looked at him for several long seconds before answering. I was trying to stop him from ruining your life. Naomi felt chills run down her arms. Because that was not denial. Ethan understood it too. The realization hit him visibly. Not explosive. Worse. Like something inside him collapsing inward. My God, he whispered. Victoria stepped forward quickly. You do not understand the pressure we were under. Ethan backed away from her immediately. Do not touch me. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. Upstairs, the distant sound of applause suddenly echoed through the ceiling again. Guests still thought a wedding was happening. They had no idea the groom downstairs was watching his entire future fall apart in real time. Then Victoria's eyes shifted toward Naomi. Cold. Sharp. Calculating. This happened because of her, she said quietly. Every head turned toward Naomi instantly. Victoria pointed directly at the waitress standing near the garage wall. A random hotel employee speaks a few words, and suddenly everyone loses their minds. Naomi froze beneath the attention. Victoria's voice grew colder. Do you really think anybody will believe a black waitress over me? The garage fell silent again. But this time, Ethan Sterling did not look at his fiancée. He looked at Naomi. And for the first time since they met that morning, his voice carried something unexpected. Respect. I do. The moment Ethan Sterling said those two words, the entire atmosphere inside the underground garage changed. I do. Simple. Quiet. Final. Victoria stared at him in disbelief, as if the idea of him trusting someone like Naomi Brooks over her was not just offensive. It was impossible. Naomi felt every eye in the garage shift toward her at once. Security guards. Noah. Even the wedding coordinator, standing nervously near the elevator doors, looked stunned. Because people like Naomi were not supposed to become the center of stories like this. They were supposed to carry trays, refill glasses, stay invisible. Victoria let out a short laugh that sounded hollow beneath the concrete ceiling. You cannot be serious. Ethan's voice remained calm. You hid my brother in a trunk. I protected you. By kidnapping my family. Victoria's expression hardened instantly. Do not pretend you care about family now, Ethan. Noah looked away bitterly. The words landed harder than anyone expected. Because deep down, everyone in that garage understood something uncomfortable. Ethan Sterling had spent years choosing business over blood, meetings over people, profit over trust. And now he was standing inside the ruins of those choices. Victoria stepped closer again, lowering her voice carefully. Everything I did was for us. Ethan shook his head slowly. No. Everything you did was for control. Upstairs, the church organ music stopped abruptly. The guests were beginning to notice the delay now. Phones buzzed. Conversations spread. Outside the garage entrance, reporters were already gathering near the cathedral courtyard trying to understand why the billionaire groom had disappeared minutes before the ceremony. Naomi suddenly heard footsteps approaching quickly from the hallway. Another member of Ethan's security team rushed into the garage, holding a phone tightly against his chest. Sir, he said breathlessly, you need to see this immediately. Ethan frowned. What? The guard handed him the phone. Ethan's expression darkened almost instantly. Naomi stepped closer carefully, trying to understand what he was seeing. It was security footage from the previous night. Grainy black and white camera footage from the underground garage. Timestamp 2:41 a.m. The video clearly showed Noah stumbling beside the limousine while two men surrounded him. Seconds later, Victoria herself appeared on camera wearing a long white coat over casual clothes. Naomi felt chills crawl across her skin. Victoria's face drained of color for the first time all morning. Ethan looked up slowly from the phone. "You were there." Victoria said nothing. Ethan replayed the footage again. This time, everyone watched in silence. Victoria speaking sharply to the men. Noah trying to pull away. The trunk opening. Then the video freezing just before the camera feed suddenly cut to black. One of the guards muttered under his breath. Somebody wiped the rest. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. "You planned all of this." Victoria crossed her arms tightly now. Her voice lost its softness completely. "Because somebody had to protect the company from him." She pointed toward Noah without looking at him. "You built Sterling Biotech from nothing, and he was going to destroy it with emotional decisions and reckless investments." Noah laughed bitterly. "You mean investments that would have exposed your fraud?" Victoria ignored him. Her eyes stayed locked on Ethan. "I made you stronger." Ethan stared at her for several long seconds. Then he quietly removed the wedding ring from his finger. The tiny sound of metal hitting concrete echoed through the garage like a gunshot. Naomi saw Victoria flinch. Not because of the ring itself. Because of what it meant. Power slipping away. Ethan's voice came out low and cold. "This wedding is over." Silence crashed down around them again. Upstairs, guests still sat beneath crystal chandeliers waiting for vows that would never happen. Victoria looked at the ring on the floor before slowly lifting her eyes toward Naomi again. The hatred in her expression felt sharp enough to cut glass. "You think this changes who you are?" she asked quietly. Naomi stood still beneath the fluorescent lights. Exhausted shoes. Wrinkled server uniform. Hands trembling slightly against the silver tray she still carried. From the ballroom upstairs. But her voice never shook. "No," she answered softly. "It changes who stopped pretending not to see the truth." Ethan looked at Naomi then. Really looked at her. Not as staff. Not as background noise. But as the woman who walked into a billionaire wedding carrying nothing except honesty while everyone else carried lies. News travels fast when billionaires fall apart in public. By the time Ethan Sterling walked out of the underground garage beside his brother and Naomi Brooks, the atmosphere upstairs had completely changed. The cathedral no longer sounded joyful. It sounded nervous. Guests whispered behind champagne glasses. Reporters crowded near the marble staircase outside. Social media influencers refreshed livestream feeds with confused smiles frozen on their faces. Something was wrong with the wedding of the year. Everyone could feel it. The massive cathedral doors slowly opened, and every conversation inside stopped at once. Ethan stepped into the room first wearing his black tuxedo, his expression unreadable beneath the soft gold light pouring through stained glass windows. Noah followed beside him looking exhausted but alive. Gasps rippled instantly through the crowd. People rose from their seats in confusion. Phones lifted into the air. Somewhere near the front row, one investor nearly dropped his champagne flute. Because Noah Sterling had been missing for almost 2 weeks. And now he was suddenly walking through the center aisle moments before the wedding ceremony. Behind them came Naomi. Quiet. Invisible no longer. Her black server uniform stood in sharp contrast against the sea of luxury surrounding her. Diamonds. Silk dresses. Designer suits. Billionaires. Politicians. Athletes. And in the middle of all of them walked a waitress carrying a silver serving tray with trembling hands and tired eyes. Some guests looked annoyed seeing her there. Others looked confused. But Ethan did not ask her to stay behind. That alone changed everything. Victoria still stood at the altar beneath a towering arch of white roses and candles. Her expression remained calm on the surface, but Naomi noticed the tension in her shoulders immediately. The perfect bride image was beginning to crack. The officiant cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Sterling," he whispered, "should we continue?" Ethan looked around the cathedral slowly. Hundreds of faces stared back at him, waiting for reassurance. Control. Performance. The kind of polished lie wealthy people preferred over ugly truth. Ethan had spent years giving rooms exactly what they wanted to hear. But not today. He reached into his jacket pocket and removed the wedding ring box slowly before stepping toward the altar. Victoria forced a smile. "Ethan," she said softly, "this is not the place." Ethan stopped inches away from her. "You are right," he answered quietly. "The truth never seems welcome in rooms like this." Silence spread across the cathedral. Sharp. Heavy. Reporters near the entrance immediately raised cameras higher. Ethan turned toward the guests. My brother did not disappear. Murmurs exploded instantly across the room. Noah lowered his head beside the front pews while security guards moved carefully through the aisles, trying to contain the growing chaos. Ethan continued speaking. He was hidden, silenced, and manipulated because he discovered criminal activity connected to Sterling Biotech accounts. Victoria's smile finally vanished completely. Ethan, she warned quietly. But Ethan did not stop. And the person responsible was standing beside me at this altar. The cathedral erupted. Guests gasped. Cameras flashed violently. Reporters shouted questions over one another while phones captured every second from every angle imaginable. Naomi stood frozen near the back of the aisle as the entire room spiraled into panic around her. She had never seen wealth collapse this closely before. It did not look glamorous. It looked terrified. Victoria stepped closer to Ethan, her voice tight now. You are destroying yourself. Ethan looked at her sadly. No, I am finally stopping the destruction. One of the giant projection screens near the cathedral entrance suddenly flickered on. Security footage from the underground garage appeared across the massive display. The footage Naomi had seen earlier. Victoria, the limousine, Noah, the trunk, guests swept through the cathedral again like a wave crashing through glass. Victoria turned pale beneath the chandelier light. Turn that off, she snapped immediately. But it was too late. The room had already seen everything. Naomi felt tears sting her eyes unexpectedly. Not because she was emotional. Because for once, the truth was louder than power. Ethan slowly turned toward the crowd again. Then toward Naomi. The entire cathedral followed his gaze. This woman tried to warn me when nobody else would, he said clearly. Naomi froze beneath hundreds of staring eyes. Ethan's voice softened slightly. And every person in this room ignored her because of what she looked like and where she worked. The silence that followed felt different this time. Not fearful, ashamed. The cathedral descended into chaos within minutes. Reporters flooded the aisles. Guests whispered into phones. Investors hurried toward exits while security teams struggled to block cameras from reaching the altar. The wedding flowers still smelled like fresh roses, but now the room felt heavy with panic instead of celebration. Ethan Sterling stood at the center of it all, watching his perfect life collapse in real time beneath flashing lights and shattered trust. Victoria Hale no longer looked like the polished socialite who had dominated magazine covers beside him for the past 2 years. The calm elegance was gone. What remained was frustration. Cornered frustration. You are making a mistake, she said sharply as security officers approached the altar. You have no idea what people will do with this story. Ethan looked exhausted now. Not physically, spiritually, like a man finally seeing how deeply he had lied to himself. The story was already written the moment you put my brother in that trunk. Victoria's eyes hardened instantly. I built your image beside you. No, Ethan answered quietly. You built a mask around me. Nearby, Noah sat in the front pew, trying to steady his breathing while paramedics checked his condition. He looked toward Ethan with an expression Naomi could not fully read. Sadness. Relief. Maybe both. The Sterling brothers had spent years divided by pride and power struggles, but in that moment neither of them looked like billionaires. They looked like family trying to survive the wreckage of ambition. Naomi remained near the back of the cathedral, holding her serving tray tightly against her chest, as if it still belonged there. She wanted to disappear again. That instinct had lived inside her for years. Blend in. Stay quiet. Avoid trouble. People working jobs like hers learned early that powerful people rarely protect the truth when the truth embarrasses them. But today something different happened. Today the truth fought back. A senior detective entered the cathedral alongside 2 financial investigators carrying folders and sealed evidence bags. Guests immediately moved aside. Nobody wanted cameras catching them too close to scandal. One investigator approached Ethan carefully. Mr. Sterling, we will need access to all company transfer records connected to these accounts. Ethan nodded once. You will have everything. Victoria laughed bitterly beneath her breath. You are handing your company to wolves. Ethan looked at her calmly. No, I am cleaning out the ones already inside. The words spread quickly through the cathedral. Naomi saw people react instantly. Some lowered their eyes in embarrassment. Others stared at her differently now. Not warmly, not kindly, but differently. as if they had suddenly realized she existed. A wealthy older woman seated near the aisle slowly stood and approached Naomi with visible discomfort. Her pearl necklace trembled slightly as she spoke. "Miss Brooks, is it?" Naomi nodded carefully. The woman hesitated before continuing. "I owe you an apology." Naomi looked surprised. The woman glanced around the cathedral as cameras continued flashing near the altar. "I saw you earlier this morning trying to speak to security," she admitted softly. "I assumed you were causing problems." Naomi said nothing, because the truth was, she was used to that assumption. The woman lowered her eyes briefly. "You were trying to save someone." Naomi's voice came out quiet. "I was trying to do the right thing." The woman nodded slowly before walking away, looking smaller somehow than when she approached. Across the cathedral, Ethan watched the interaction silently. Something about it hit him harder than the scandal itself, because for the first time he understood what invisibility really meant. Naomi had walked through rooms like this her entire life, carrying intelligence, instincts, and dignity, while people reduced her to a uniform before she even spoke. Ethan moved through the crowd toward her carefully, while guests parted instinctively around him. Billionaires were used to attention. Naomi was not. He stopped in front of her beneath the cathedral lights. Up close, she looked exhausted. Her mascara slightly smudged from stress. Her shoes worn from double shifts. Hands still trembling faintly around the silver tray. And suddenly Ethan felt ashamed. Ashamed that the only reason people finally listened to her was because he did first. "Naomi," he said quietly. She looked up cautiously. Ethan swallowed once before speaking again. "You saved my brother's life today." Naomi shook her head gently. "I just refused to ignore what everybody else wanted to pretend they did not see." Ethan stared at her for several seconds. Then he answered with a truth that changed the room all over again. "That is exactly why you saved him." 3 months later, the cathedral wedding that never happened was still everywhere. News channels replayed the footage daily. Financial podcasts called it the collapse of a billion-dollar illusion. Social media gave it names like the trunk wedding and the waitress who exposed the lie. But Naomi Brooks avoided watching any of it. Fame had never been part of her life plan. Survival had been. Most mornings still began before sunrise inside her small apartment 20 minutes outside downtown Palm Beach. The alarm rang at 5:30. Coffee brewed in a scratched machine older than her car. Bills still sat stacked beside the kitchen counter. Life did not magically become easy because the internet suddenly noticed her existence. But something inside Naomi had changed. She no longer walked through rooms trying to disappear. Across the country, Sterling Biotech was rebuilding itself from the inside out. Federal investigations uncovered millions of dollars hidden across fraudulent accounts connected to Victoria Hale and several corrupt executives tied to the merger scheme. Investors panicked at first. Board members resigned. Headlines predicted collapse. But something unexpected happened instead. Ethan Sterling changed. Not the polished version from magazine covers. The real one. The man who finally understood that intelligence means nothing without character, and power means nothing if it only protects itself. Noah returned to the company weeks later, this time not as a rival to his brother, but as his partner. Their relationship remained complicated. Healing always is. But for the first time in years, they spoke honestly. And honesty turned out to be worth more than control ever was. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Naomi finished a lunch shift at a quiet cafe near the marina and found a black SUV waiting outside her apartment building. She immediately froze. Old instincts returned fast. Trouble, wealth, attention. They usually traveled together. A man in a gray suit stepped out holding an umbrella. "Miss Brooks." Naomi nodded carefully. "Mr. Sterling would like to speak with you." Naomi almost laughed from disbelief. 3 months ago, Ethan Sterling probably would not have noticed if she passed him in a hallway. Now his driver stood outside her apartment during a thunderstorm waiting to escort her somewhere. Life was strange that way. 30 minutes later, Naomi stepped inside the newly renovated Sterling Foundation building overlooking the Atlantic coastline. Massive glass windows reflected the storm clouds outside, while employees moved quietly through bright hallways carrying folders and laptops. The building smelled like fresh paint and expensive coffee. Ethan waited near the conference room windows wearing a navy suit without a tie, his sleeves rolled slightly at the wrists. He looked different now, less polished, more human. When he saw Naomi enter, he immediately stood. "Thank you for coming." Naomi crossed her arms lightly. Your assistant sounded dramatic. Ethan smiled faintly for the first time. I am learning that honesty usually sounds dramatic to people who spent years avoiding it. Naomi looked around the room. Carefully. Why am I here? Ethan slid a folder across the conference table toward her. Naomi opened it slowly. Her eyes widened instantly. Scholarship programs. Community outreach funding. Hospitality training grants. Millions of dollars allocated toward education programs for underserved workers across Florida. At the top of the proposal sat one title in bold letters. The Naomi Brooks Initiative. Naomi looked up immediately. I cannot accept this. Ethan shook his head. It is not charity. Then what is it? Ethan stepped closer to the window, overlooking the ocean below. It is accountability. Naomi stayed silent. Ethan turned back toward her slowly. You walked into a room full of powerful people and told the truth when it would have been safer to stay quiet. His voice softened. Most people with power failed that test. You did not. Naomi looked down at the folder again. Her hands trembled slightly against the paper. Not because of the money. Because for the first time in her life, someone powerful was offering respect instead of pity. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass windows while the city moved below them in blurred gray motion. Ethan watched Naomi carefully before speaking one final time. You know the strangest part of all this? Naomi looked up. Ethan gave a small, tired smile. The woman everyone ignored at my wedding turned out to be the only person who actually saw me clearly. Naomi stared at him for a moment before answering quietly. No, Mr. Sterling. Her voice remained calm. Steady. Certain. I just saw the truth before you were finally willing to.